Hello, everyone, and welcome to our second week of the Comedy of Errors. So how are you adjusting to the language so far? I hope you're giving it a chance. I really encourage you to not go find a simplified version of this and think that you're reading the same thing, because you won't be getting the same experience as if you just take it on yourself to work through the language if you're having trouble with it. Look words up. Uh, the best way that you're going to master the language in Shakespeare is to do what his audience would have done, which is to watch it being performed. As I mentioned, if you have access to Amazon Prime, or you can probably rent it for $1.99 or something, there's a great BBC version of this play on Amazon. It cuts a few lines, but it doesn't cut very many because it's already a short play. So if you can watch it with the caps on, turn the closed caption on, or have the book right in front of you while you read it, while you're watching it, so you can read along as they go. The language just comes alive because you're seeing them perform it. You're seeing their expressions and their reactions and their movement. So if you're having trouble with the language, please watch a version of it rather than trying to go to some simplified version that really dumbs it down, because the beauty and the genius of Shakespeare is the language. And once you've left the language behind, his language behind, you've lost the things that have made Shakespeare who he is. So attempt to, you can go on YouTube and find amateur versions that are pretty good for free, but do your best to work through the language itself and not go to some simplified version. Reading a synopsis of the play or a summary of the play is fine to help you get into the action, but don't try to read a version that goes away from Shakespeare's language. Everyone here is capable of understanding it. His audiences were watching it perform, not reading it. He didn't mean it to be read, he meant it to be performed. So at this point, watching it performed while you're looking at the language is the best way to get through a Shakespeare play if you're having a little trouble adjusting to the language. Okay, so as we begin, we have Act 3, Scene 1. We are at the home of Antipholus of Ephesus, and he is trying to get into his own house, but Antipholus of Syracuse is already inside his house. And of course, his wife, Adriana, thinks that she is with her husband when she is actually with his twin brother. Now, when Antipholus arrives at his house, he's accompanied by his Dromio, the Dromio of Ephesus. He's accompanied by Angelo the goldsmith, Balthazar the merchant. And so he's pounding on the door trying to figure out why his wife and the Dromio won't let him in, while she's, with someone that she thinks is her husband. Happens to be his brother, but she thinks it's her husband. So the people that are with Antipholus on the outside kind of indicate maybe she's got someone in there that she doesn't want you to see. Maybe there's something else going on here that shouldn't be going on. And so they're kind of making that hint. He gets disgusted in the end, of course, and leaves and goes somewhere else. And Angelo the goldsmith is supposed to deliver him a gold chain later in the day. And of course, that gold chain becomes a big object of contention later in the play, and a big part of the mistaken identities. So that chain is going to play, that gold chain is going to play a big part in the play to come. So after we have this, where they're right out, they're right on each side of a door, close enough for the two Dromios to basically see each other if they'd wanted to, then they separate. But from there, the mistaken identities just keep going. The situations where they keep mistaking each other just keep going. We have this gold chain. So Angelo the goldsmith comes back to the house, thinks that the correct Antipholus, the Antipholus of Ephesus, is inside because he sees Antipholus of Syracuse, assumes it's him, assumes he finally got inside, and gives him the gold chain. Now, he needs to be paid for it, and Antipholus of Syracuse doesn't have the money to pay him for it there. He's going to, the goldsmith says he'll get the money later, basically. And now Antipholus of Syracuse has the gold chain. Angelo the goldsmith assumes that Antipholus of Ephesus has the gold chain because he doesn't know there's two different people. So this gold chain is going to keep getting people in trouble. We have the courtesan. Antipholus of Ephesus had visited a courtesan, and he had taken a gold ring from her, and he was supposed to give her the gold chain in return. Well, now she doesn't have the ring or the chain, so she's coming looking for the gold chain, or for Antipholus to pay her back with the ring or something or other. So we have this new character, the courtesan, who's going to manage to mix them both up and be mad about the gold chain. That gold chain just keeps weaving its way through the story. We have the goldsmith, of course, who's wandering around town looking for Antipholus of Ephesus to pay him for a gold chain that he never gave him. And of course, when he meets up with him, he's completely confused. He doesn't understand. I mean, the Antipholus of Ephesus does not understand why he keeps saying, give me the chain. And the goldsmith is like, give me the money. And then, of course, they're just both confused because they don't understand what's going on here. And then in the end, Antipholus of Ephesus is going to be arrested. Angelo the goldsmith is going to have him arrested because he won't pay him back. And Angelo needs the money to pay his bills to a ship's captain who is trying to leave that night. So this gold chain and this mistaken identity is just getting everybody in trouble by this point. Everybody's confused by the end of the section you're reading. Now, the characteristics of a Shakespeare comedy are fairly consistent. They vary a little bit from comedy to comedy, but there's a reason why we call certain plays comedies. Some are called tragedies and some are called histories. Those are the three divisions of Shakespearean plays: comedies, histories, and tragedies. And the ones that are comedies have certain things in common. They don't necessarily make you laugh out loud. This play may not be making you laugh out loud, but it is a comedy for certain reasons. There is usually the struggle of young lovers to overcome problems, often the result of interference from their elders. Now, you may not see that in this one as much. There is a problem with lovers. They're not necessarily young lovers, they're older married lovers. But if you think of a play like Midsummer Night's Dream, that's the exact plot going on in Midsummer Night's Dream, and other Shakespearean comedies have this quite a bit. Othello, Merchant of Venice is what I was thinking. But Othello does too. Othello ends up being a tragedy. But Merchant of Venice is considered a comedy, though it certainly doesn't make us laugh today. But it has this same struggle of young lovers. And so that's something, some kind of struggle between lovers is always part of a comedy. There's some element of separation and reunification in comedies. We certainly see that between not only Antipholus of Ephesus and his wife, but we see that their father and his wife were separated many, many years ago. We have all these people that are separated from each other and need to get back together with the right people. There's always mistaken identities. Often they involve disguise. In our case, they just involve the fact that two different people, they don't know that there's two different people who look the same. But mistaken identities are a big part of Shakespearean comedy. There's always a clever servant, so we have Dromio in that situation. There are family tensions. Most comedies involve something to do within families, and so we always have these family tensions that are resolved at the end. And there's complex interwoven plots where you are seeing a lot of different things happening, where we have not only the mistaken identities, but then we have Angelo the goldsmith and the gold chain. We have the courtesan and the ring. We have these different things. We have Antipholus of Ephesus being arrested and Dromio trying to get the money, and one Dromio has money for one thing, the other Dromio has money for something else. It gets very complex and interwoven. And then there's a frequent use of puns. Now, the problem for us is that these are Elizabethan Renaissance puns, and so we don't always understand the implications behind their puns, but they're making a lot of play on words that if you look up a good annotated Shakespeare or something, it'll tell you about the different puns on words. And quite often these were pretty naughty. A lot of Shakespeare's plays have a lot of really dirty stuff in them. There's books written on dirty Shakespeare, and we don't catch most of those today. Romeo and Juliet has so many of them, but when it's taught in high school, of course, teachers don't point that out to high school students because they don't want to put up with all the snickering and that would go on. But frequently the puns are something that is pretty bawdy, as one of my teachers used to say. Now, what makes things a comedy, even if they don't make you laugh out loud, even if they don't have you rolling in the aisles, there's two things that make the comedies will have the characteristics that we talked about. But what tells you this is a comedy is the fact that it will move from disorder to order. The beginning of this play, everybody's pretty much in disorder. People don't know who's who. We've got people looking for each other. We have separated families, separated marriages. And so we have a lot of disorder. By the end of the play, it will all have resolved itself. And that's one of the things that makes this a comedy. The tragedies always move from order to disorder. So they're the opposite. You will have an orderly society that falls apart across, or an orderly family that falls apart across the course of a tragedy. Where in a comedy, these things are going to come back from disorder to order. And comedies always have a happy ending. Now, we don't always see things just because they have a happy ending as being a comedy, but it is a characteristic of a comedy in Shakespeare's time that they will have a happy ending. And quite a few of the comedies, that happy ending involves a marriage. And that's always seen as a happy ending in Shakespeare. Okay, so next week your prompt book assignment will be due. This is a more creative way than writing a paper for you to show me that you understand the action of the play. In the prompt book, you're going to be telling me what the setting looks like. You're going to be telling me how the audience is, or how the doesn't matter how the audience is clothed, how the actors are clothed. You're going to be telling me how you would see it blocked on a stage. So maybe this character, as he says this, he's walking left to right, or he's turning to face the person he's talked to, or maybe he's turning his back on the person he's talking to. You would give, if you were talking about, for instance, the scene where Antipholus of Ephesus is trying to get into his house and Dromio of Syracuse won't let him in, you could be saying that Antipholus has a disgusted look on his face, Antipholus has a confused look on his face. You're going to give all these directions as if you were directing whatever scene you choose. Remember that you're just choosing one scene. We have 5 acts, but each act has several scenes in it. So pick one scene that you can envision in your mind, and that's what you're putting in the prompt book. So be sure and look at that assignment from last week because it will be due next week. All right, so that's all we have to talk about today. Oh, I did want to make one more comment. Remember I said last week that Shakespeare did not speak in Old English. I just want to emphasize that again. If you didn't watch that one, be sure you do, because several people mentioned the fact that he, on the discussion boards, mentioned that he used Old English. That is not correct. He used early contemporary or early modern English. Old English is a whole different thing that none of us can read anymore except the people that are experts and study it. So, remember that Shakespeare, if you hear people saying Shakespeare spoke in Old English, that is absolutely not true. He spoke in the exact same language that we speak today. He just was very creative